Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone to the second in the series of the Nigerian Academy of Science COVID-19 seminars. And one of this is dealing with the critical matter of education. It's good to thank everybody because I know also there's a bit of webinar fatigue these days, but this is a critical topic that we'll be dealing with today. And to do that, I think we have a very good layout and very good panelists to help us through this discussion. I must thank Professor Familoni, who is the moderator, who will be conducting this for us on behalf of the Academy, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, University of Lagos. And we have also Professor David Mba from the UK, from the Montfort University. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Professor Labode Pupola of Osun State University, Vice-Chancellor there. Thank you very much. It's very good to have Professor Charles Wambebe. It's been quite a while, since we've had him with us, and it's a pleasure, even though it's virtual, to have him here with us. And one of the things he's done in the last few years is to teach and supervise in South Africa. So he brings the South African experience to this discussion. And I think, and then we have from the private sector, Professor Adebayo, who is the Dean of the Postgraduate School of the Covenant University. So I must thank you all, not just the panelists, but even thank all the participants for registering and being here today. We look forward to a very rich time. And just opening up that way, I would like to now invite, before Professor Familoni takes over completely, it's my pleasure to invite the President of the Nigerian Academy of Science to give some opening remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome everybody who's joined so far. I know a lot more people will join us. I want to welcome particularly our resource people, our resource persons who are joining us to share their experience on this very important topic. I believe we are at the crossroads right now as far as higher education is concerned here in Nigeria. The system has always been bedeviled with very many problems. The commonest one that people will talk about is, again, one that is on now, which has to do with the strike of some of the unions. And but you will all agree that the COVID-19 pandemic, which threw the whole world into turbulence, has particularly adversely affected the educational sector here in Nigeria. As you all know, in many developed countries, people were able to switch to virtual learning, some within 2 weeks, some within a week, and most within a month. And our schools have remained closed since around March, the 3rd week of March, when there was a national lockdown imposed here. And the problems still remain. While even some African countries, I'm sure Professor Wambebe will share what happened in South Africa. I know that they were able to manage, and some have managed better than others. I know in North Africa, they went back to school, the universities continued functioning. But I'm aware that a few private universities were able to keep some teaching and learning going on, but most other universities in Nigeria just have not been able to do anything. And so what is the future? Even if, as most likely, we are now optimistic that a vaccine will be found, even if it takes another 1 or 2 months. And where are we in Nigeria? What's the roadmap? How can we do things better? I'd like us to hear from those we have mandated to speak with us. And if during the question and answer session, maybe others can contribute, including ourselves, who've also been in university administration and so on here in Nigeria and all that. So for now, on behalf of the fellows of the Nigerian Academy of Science everywhere, some of them will be not just Professor Mba, who is one of us, and logging in from the UK. I know others are from the US, and plus those around here. I welcome everybody and the public who are joining us for this. We are all concerned. It's a serious matter. We have a problem in our hands, a national problem that we have to solve. Even if it's about the strike, we need a new way of getting things done. We must have a paradigm shift so that the sector can survive in our nation. But we'll hear our resource people. I look forward to a very fruitful and rewarding discussion. Moderator, please, thank you, and back to you. Welcome on board, everybody.
Thank you very much, our President, the President of Nigeria Academy of Science, Professor Musto, for the opening remark. We thank you for chairing the Academy in a wonderful way. We thank you for this, for the panelists of today. My name is Professor Oluwole Familodi from University of Lagos, Deputy Vice-Chancellor at University of Lagos, and a fellow of the Academy. I'm happy to note that we have a wonderful panelists today from different backgrounds that will give us different shades to our topic of today, which is building a resilient higher education system in Nigeria. Our panelists will give different shades to different opinions in different backgrounds we are coming from to give a very good session today, make it possible for us to have a good communique at the end of this to be able to move Nigeria forward in our educational system. I am happy to note that we have, as a panelist today, the Vice-Chancellor of Osun State University, Professor Labode Pokuola, who is a Vice-Chancellor. He knows we have a very good idea of how universities are performing in Nigeria, being a Vice-Chancellor. We have also Professor Abiodun Adebayo, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies at Convened University. And you know, Convened University has been doing very well as a university. So we'll be happy to have the opinion of Professor Adebayo. We have a senior member of the Academy, Professor Charles Wambebe, who has been in forefront of a good academic and in practice. And finally, we have to have international flavor to this, a fellow of the Academy, Professor David Mba, the Pro Vice Chancellor, Research and Enterprise, Dean, Computing Engineering and Media at the Montfort University in UK. All of this one will give us a wonderful time. So I promise that there will be a very good time. Let us all make sure that we keep logged on and be attentive as we have all of these members of panel, one after the other. Each panel will speak, and if you have questions, can put it in the chat group, or you reserve it until when we ask you to give the questions. So I thank you all. I will ask, the first speaker today is going to be the Professor Labode Pokuola, Vice-Chancellor of Osun State University. He is special because he's an old boy of Government College Ibadan. That will make even it better, being a GCI old boy. So Professor Pokuola, please, I will be speaking for about 10 minutes. Please, time because when it's 1 minute or 2 minutes, I will warn you, please. Thank you very much. Professor Pokuola, please.
Thank you very much, too. And thank you also for the introduction. We're dealing with a very serious matter, and I'm being given 10 minutes. I'll see how far I can go. Thank you so much, everybody, and very good morning. I'm glad to see David again remotely. The last time we met was the event of the Academy in Lagos. So I hope everybody is doing well. Now, building resilience in higher education in Nigeria. I just want to say that, yes, our educational system in this country is very fragile, very vulnerable. So there is need for resilience. By way of preambles, we all know when higher education started in this country. Of course, before University of Ibadan in 1948, we also had the experience of Yaba, where different courses were taught. So I'm not going to dwell so much on that. But we also know that we've had phenomenal growth in establishment of higher educational institutions in this country, universities, both public and private, polytechnics and all whatnot. And the trajectory of higher education has been quite interesting. But I like to describe it as a coat of many colors. We have the good, we have the bad, we have the ugly. In the past, there wasn't much talk about multidisciplinarity, but gradually, because of the need for us to latch on to what is happening globally, quite a number of our universities are adopting multi and transdisciplinarity. As we speak, there are so many crises in the Nigerian university system, but people talk more about funding. But I have decided to talk less about funding, because oftentimes I ask myself, as a Vice-Chancellor, as a former member of council at UR, as a former dean of the postgraduate school, virtually all positions one would think of, I ask myself, what have we done with the little fund that has been given to us? The answer is neither here nor there. So yes, we have funding problems, but there are also issues about the way we manage our funds. So yes, there is need for resilience, and because the environment is quite fragile. So what are the factors that have caused this fragility in our higher education? The first one is the proliferation of tertiary institutions, particularly universities. And of course, the objective is quite good. You want to create access to people who don't have access, but it has also come with problem of limited capacity to be able to man these institutions. Many of the institutions are poorly staffed. The quality of available instructors and the passion to do serious teaching, research, and community is questionable. Most of the times, the people who are actually employed into some of these institutions are not people who should be there. They are people who are looking for jobs. And so this doesn't really help. It's not about people who have passion for the job. We also have the limitation in the available technologies for delivery of quality education. Weak monitoring and evaluation is an issue. It's like everybody is just doing whatever they like. Yes, we have our regulators there, but I don't know how well this monitoring and evaluation has actually gone on. And in spite of these limitations, we still have some institutions that are getting it relatively right. But the COVID-19 has challenged our readiness and relevance as higher institutions in Nigeria. We were all caught napping, and we are all struggling to see how we can get out of this. Now, what are the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic? I have this chart that shows how it affects livelihoods and its social effect, the economic effect of it, the global effect of it. They are all very profound, and they affect Nigerian university system very profoundly. So what are the roles of higher educational institutions in the age of sustainable development? We are in sustainable development, and sustainable development actually will have a role to play in the way we build resilience. And that's why I want to talk a little bit more about this. So a higher education institution must be able to impact development dynamically, meaningfully, impactfully, and cost-effectively. And research must play a role in this. Now, we live in a globalized environment. The world is changing, and whether we like it or not, we must operate with other segments of society. We must operate with the rest of the world because there is increasing interdependence, and this is likely to become a norm. We just have to operate with other parts of the world. Secondly, there is the potential for rising competition amongst the power centers, and this is real. Nigeria cannot afford to stand aloof. Thirdly, the global economic integration increases. As it increases, there'll be spillovers. Monetary issues will come up, trade policy issues will come up. The Nigerian academia must play a role in this. Fourthly, increasing interdependence will also be associated with the vulnerabilities that we talked about, the fragility we talked about. And so weaker economies will suffer. The question is what role for the Nigerian academia? I move on to talk about how the SDGs can actually be a platform for resilience building in the academia. We all know the story of the SDGs. We also know the declaration of the United Nations. We know the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we know the 169 targets. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that. Now, the interconnectedness of the trial of environment, economy, and society, we as a university system in this country must understand it. I make bold to say that quite a number of our colleagues in the university system don't even understand what the sustainable goals are about. It's important that we entrench it in our curricula, we mainstream it in whatever we're doing by way of research and development. Otherwise, we cannot really make a headway. We cannot build resilience that we need to build. Of course, this chart shows interconnectedness. So we need to adapt to a new normal if we have to be resilient. COVID-19 pandemic is indeed an enormous shock globally, but it's affecting us the more. The question is, what is the role of the higher education sector in Nigeria? We also ask, how do we prove our societal relevance, if any? How do we justify the society's investment in us? We complain, whether we like it or not, society is investing in us, the society is paying our salaries, the society is providing the meager infrastructure that it can. How do we justify it? There are also many more questions that we need to answer as higher educational institutions in this country. So I have some immediate ideas, and the first one is the need for us to intensify research and development. Our research and development trajectory is questionable in this country. We need to intensify that. We need to train skilled manpower. The training we are offering is not really helping the development of the country. We need to train skilled manpower and to be able to make use of adapted technologies from abroad. There are so many technologies from abroad. We are just consumers. But we also need to train people who can even consume these technologies very well. Teachers need to be trained. Our teachers mostly are not trained. People who go into teaching in this country, most of them go in there because they do not have a choice. We need to identify and provide solutions to local problems for sustainable development. Okay, so these are some basic things that we really need to do. But in the way of building resilience, I want to identify 3 steps. The first is we need to build the buffer capacity. And what do I mean by this? We need to diversify options for staff and student enrollment. Go to quite a number of universities, even federal universities in this country. Members of staff are from a particular locality. It doesn't help to build resilience. We need to have students, staff from diverse backgrounds, diverse settings. We have to raise human capital endowments, capacity development. It has to continue. We have to improve on it. We need to improve the rights and access to education and education resources.
2 more minutes.
Okay, I will.
Prof, we need 2 more minutes, please.
Yes. Okay, so I will move on very fast, okay? Yes, there is need for stewardship. We are not really providing stewardship in our university system in this country. It's more of exploitation. It's important for us to improve our stewardship. There is need for self-organization. We are not organized enough in the Nigerian university system. We have to self-organize ourselves. We have to increase our adaptive capacity. There has to be opportunities for knowledge combination, promotion of existing varieties of platforms. This is one platform that we can utilize. We can do online teaching. Osun State University just did a virtual convocation. We have done virtual matriculation. This is possible. There's a lot of power blocks in our university system. We have to narrow the power differential, and we need to also build on our indigenous knowledge. I have this link, which can be useful to Nigerian universities, just a recent publication by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, of which I'm the director for Nigeria. The Nigerian university system can benefit from the guide. So I'm really very sorry that I had to rush through this. 10 minutes, not adequate to do justice to the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Labode. Thank you very much, Labode, Vice-Chancellor of Osun State University. I know time is short, but we are thinking that by the question and answer, you have enough time to probably expatiate on what we have said. And I'm sure this will be available to people to look at afterwards so that you can have enough time to deal with it. I thank you very much, Professor Labode. Next is another professor, the Dean School of Postgraduate Studies at Convened University in Ota, Professor Abiodun Adebayo, will be speaking for about 10 minutes. And as I said, there will be room for questions and answers. So you just give them the brief, and then whatever they've done, they will see the question and answer will assist you. I thank you. Professor Adebayo, please, you have the time. Thank you. Professor Adebayo, please.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, the moderator. And may I just observe the protocols and to also to appreciate the organizer for inviting me to make this presentation. I want to appreciate what the erudite scholar have presented earlier on, Professor Kukola. You have built a very wonderful foundation for me to ride on today. So I'm going to be speaking on the impact of COVID-19 on teaching and learning, how it affects the private tertiary institution, still looking at building resilient higher education system. So having said that, I will be guided by this outline. But again, we understand, according to UNESCO, that 91% of the world's students' population have been affected till date by this pandemic. That is, students are no longer in school, all schools shut down as a result of this pandemic globally. But again, if you look at where we were, as this was actually taken from UNESCO's website. As at 17th of February this year, you could see here that the ones painted in white, the countries painted in white, means that the schools, they were still in schools. Schools were opened for all categories of students to come in. But also, you will note that it was in December last year that where the pandemic started in China, in Wuhan, how it resulted into partial closure of schools. Then up here is Mongolia. But nearly about 1 million learners were affected at that time. And that was just one country here, that's the Mongolia. But if you also look at the 4th of April, in April on the 4th, according to UNESCO's report, it showed that it rose to about 91.2% of the total persons that were enrolled. Over 1 billion persons were affected. And that's coming from about 192 countries worldwide. And of course, sometimes in July, we can see how schools were gradually opening up, reopening again as a result of that. But if we look at this data was collected yesterday to tell us what is the latest report. Now we have 52 countries are currently locked down by this pandemic. That is gradual reopening of the schools. Now, having said that, it's important to also situate here the impact of COVID-19 on private universities. Of course, it has disrupted the academic calendar as we speak right now. A number of them are still waiting for NUC to make pronouncement before resumption of academic activities will commence, that is physical resumption of students on campus. Now, research was at its lowest ebb during the pandemic. Of course, if schools are shut down, what can you do? Nobody was talking about research. And if you're not talking about research, then how do you also deal with the pandemic, the coronavirus plague? Meaning that for us at the private sector, and indeed the Nigerian university system, it was the research at this time was nothing to write home about. This also resulted in the downsizing of both teaching and non-teaching staff by some private institutions. A number of them could not cope with the income. IGR was affected. Salaries had to be cut down as a result of that. Now, currently, there are 171 universities in Nigeria, and the breakdown as follows: 44 federal, 48 states, and 79 of them are in the private sector. Now, but most private universities began to use the e-learning platform in order to be able to conduct learning and teaching. And this primarily were done using Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, WhatsApp, and Skype, etc. But again, the benefits and challenges of this were also there for us to see. The benefits of e-learning enormous, as it gives room for persons to interact one-on-one using several devices, using several media. You could chat while classes will be going on. It promotes active and independent learning, very efficient way of delivering courses, and the student can also get back to watch the video. It's very convenient, very flexible. It's cut across all ages. You could be engaged full-time and you could still participate and do quite a lot of things. But there are obvious challenges. We could not do practicals all through this period. I'm talking about the web practicals. What persons were doing were the alternative to practicals, hoping that when resumption comes in, the students will be able to have some hands-on experiences. Of course, there might be some lack of attentiveness from and this distraction from the students, and resources required to be very intensive, and access was a major challenge for some students, particularly in some private sector. A number of students who stayed at home could be distracted, had issue with the service providers, and the issue bordering on academic integrity was also a major issue for a number of universities who were all engaging this platform. How do you conduct your exams? In fact, that was the singular reason why Covenant has not been able to conduct its own exam, because we insist that the students must be on ground, because we cannot vouch for the academic integrity. And the internet accessibility was also an issue. Then, of course, costs. It was too expensive. Now, this was obtained from the online magazines. And to let us know how private university could take the lead in online learning. The federal universities are shut down, and some other state universities who are also members of the University of ASU joined. And it was difficult for them to also partake here. But for the private sectors, online examinations were going on. And this is a headline caption: Nigerian university students find online learning painful. And the reason is also contained right there. This university was from one of these private universities from the Southwest here. And these are reports from Tech Cabal, where they also try to give an explanation of some private universities who are currently engaging on online and some of the platforms which they also engaged upon. And let me just briefly mention here concerning mode of the platform we also use here at Covenant during COVID-19 pandemic. Covenant adopted quite a number of learning platforms during the lockdown, and this includes Zooms as lectures were held. We also use Google Meet, and quite a number of other platforms were engaged. And we have our own inbuilt learning management system where lectures were uploaded and students can go in there. Voice over PowerPoint was also done and all of that. At the School of Postgraduate Studies here, I must say here that between September 2019 and March 20th, 2020, that is within the period before the lockdown, we could not compare the kind of results we achieved in terms of the number of students that also had their defense at various level oral examinations that were conducted. Quite, in fact, enormous, more than 2 times, much more than what we had in 9 months under before the lockdown. And during the lockdown, we had about that in 2 months, we've had quite over a turnover of students making their presentation through the virtual means and remotely. I must also say here that the Coursera platform was also engaged upon by Covenant University. Coursera is one of the e-learning platforms that builds skills, access to that, and a number of our students are already certified in different courses during this lockdown. See, these have been the measures that Covenant University had put in place, and that actually worked for us, meaning that in Coursera, there are over 3,500 courses. So a student who will, who knows the kind of skill set he needs for the industry would have gotten some level of certification in this area. But the question we will ask ourselves, what happened during this after?
Prof, sir, 2 minutes to go.
It's all right, sir. What
Thank you.
is the aftermath of COVID-19 in terms of teaching and learning? We are seeing a situation whereby there will be blended learning in this, meaning that the face-to-face regular classroom learning interaction will increase and the e-learning will also increase. And the online learning will be also strategic. There will be priority that will be given by each institution because the benefits are quite enormous. The recommendation for building a resilient tertiary education. One is such that our NUC, that is the National Universities Commission, criteria for open and distant learning should be reviewed because it has given quite a lot of, it is blocking quite a number of institutions from participating, and it should be made to run as an e-learning platform, instead of, the current situation that we currently have. And government and proprietors of federal universities and state and also private should, as a matter of urgency, invest more in infrastructural facilities, particularly in IT, and build smart university campuses. And NUC should also make e-learning an integral part of tertiary education. And universities should also invest in training. I was excited when Professor Hukola mentioned about training. Training is the way to really go. Thank you, everyone, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Professor Adebayo from Covenant University. We have heard of your exploits during this pandemic that made it possible for you to be able to go through the problem the problem we have at the moment. Thank you very much. We have next Professor Charles Wambebe, who is going to be speaking to us and his own experience on how to build a resilient higher education system in Nigeria. And Professor, you have this floor. Thank you very much. You have about 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me see. I'm trying to share my slide. I hope I can. No. Or can Angie help me share? Can the Secretariat help me to share my slide? Hello, can I? Okay, let me see. Okay. Oh, no, this is not the one. Sorry. I'm having challenge with. Can the moderator help me share my slide?
We're going to share your slides now. So.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, as that is going on, thanks for the previous speakers. They've touched on a lot of things that are also common in South Africa. What I noticed there is the fact that government actually came in forcefully to support the universities to be able to continue teaching the students through e-learning. They provided funds, and they also provided, entered into agreement with some of the companies so that they were able to give data to the students, because some of the students are not able to get data for all these e-learning activities. So government really had a big role to play in the success that have been achieved there in South Africa through this COVID-19 to continue the education at the higher level. The second point I would like to mention, as the slides are still coming, is that, of course, just like here, there are differences between the private and the public universities. For the private universities, they were able to flow easily because they have the resources, and most of the students already had laptops. So they were able to start e-learning, and so they didn't lose anything at all. For the public universities, it took a bit longer to get into this mode. But my university is a public university in Pretoria, but we're able to go with our students and continue teaching without any break at all. Then the third point is the examination, which the previous speaker was speaking about. My university, we have actually resorted to doing the exam when the students are back, and that's what happened. Now the government had announced that the final year students, postgraduate students should come back to school. So they are back. So it's now that they are doing their exams. They started about 3 weeks ago because the exams could not be conducted properly through the e-learning platform. And then the fourth point is that there were challenges because some of the students come from villages where internet connectivity was a challenge, and in some students, but of course it is worthwhile because instead of them losing all this time of COVID-19 lockdown, in South Africa, the lockdown started in March, and it's still on. It's going to be off by 15th of October or so. So it's expensive, but then it was worthwhile. It's money well spent. The sixth point I will mention is the fact that just again, as someone has said, we could not do any laboratory work. In fact, like my students, my final year students, I wanted them to do lab work, but we had to change as a policy. We changed it because of the situation so that they could just do a review article. They could just write a review article. So that affected experience which they will have gained from such laboratory activity. Then the next point is that the universities are actually now seeing the importance of getting some of the studies done online and then some done by face-to-face. Because just like here in South Africa, there are many students who are qualified to go into university, but they're not able to have space to be admitted. So through e-learning, they could be able to benefit. I'm sure some of you know about University of South Africa, which conducts most of its courses online. They are actually, in terms of number, they are our largest university in South Africa. Most of their courses are online. Of course, there are cases where you have to go to the university for face-to-face, like during an exam, but most of the courses just online. So it seems there will be a blend of the two systems when everything is settled. Then another point which is very encouraging is that as part of the lockdown,
seems
Professor, I'm very encouraged with the way when the pandemic started, they set up a presidential task force. This time, okay, a presidential task force, and they budgeted for each sector, including higher education, even primary education. No sector was left out, and they released the money. And I'm happy that even the return of our final year students, for example, they made sure that each university was prepared with all that we needed. They provided the money, all the materials needed for PE and all that. So really, the government should be commended a lot. They have been very, very proactive. Thank you so much.
For your presentation, despite the fact that your slide did not come up, we are still able to get some of the things that you want to say. I'm sure when it comes to question and answer, there will be question. Please, can you please put your question on the chat box? Sorry, on question and answer. I have some there already, or on the chat box. Either of the two. We look at it so that I'll be able to present your questions to the panelists when time comes. Thank you very much, sir, for the 3 presenters. Now we need to have another perspective from England. From England, we have Professor David Mba, a fellow of the Academy of Science and a Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Research and Enterprises, Dean, Computing, Engineering and Media, the Montfort University in UK. Professor Mba, you have your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please, can you confirm you can see the slides just to make sure that we don't have any problems?
Yes, you can see you are sharing your slide already.
Thank you, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Mr. President, other fellows of the Academy of Science, my co-panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. A lot of what already has been said, in fact, mirrors some of the experiences in the UK. So my talk is going to give a UK perspective and how this, how we've addressed some of the challenges that COVID has caused in our sector. I think the president said in his welcome address that in some of the developed countries, we're able to switch online very quickly. Yes and no, sir, because there are some issues which I suppose I will allude to as I present this now. First and foremost is I'm going to go through a kind of a sequence of events from the initial lockdown in the UK in March and what has happened subsequent to the lockdown until where we are now. And at each of these stages, I will explain some of the thinking and some of the challenges that we've had to face. Because ultimately, in the end, it's about building a resilient HE system that takes cognizance of all these things, experiences, to prepare for the future. So I'll begin with March in the UK when we went into lockdown. The very first thing, once all our students dispersed, bearing in mind that, for instance, in my university, we're not a Russell Group university, so we're not a research intensive university. We're kind of a widening participation university, i.e. we have students from a whole range of diverse backgrounds. So once the lockdown started and everybody went home, the very first thing that we realized, particularly as we begin to move some of our teaching and learning online, was the big digital divide. You know, the divide between some of our students who perhaps came from wealthier families, having things like laptops, which in a way a lot of us had taken for granted. That, you know, in a country like the United Kingdom, all our students would have laptops, etc. But, you know, there was a very, very quick reality check that is not necessarily the case. In a way also, as we went into lockdown towards the end of March, most of the teaching, thankfully, had just about finished. So really, the April during the academic calendar was for us to kind of revise and prepare for the assessments in March. So thankfully, you know, because not all universities are prepared to switch online immediately. It's just not in the business model at this point in time. So the very first thing was a digital divide. And how did we have to address this? Simply, we had to spend money. We had to very quickly buy, and I'm not joking, hundreds of laptops, and arrange a system where we loaned these laptops to students who just didn't have access to a digital platform to allow them to carry on their study. We had to arrange a system of purchase. We had to arrange a system of delivery. So it was like giving to students on loan, like you would loan a library book. So this was one of the very first things that came to mind, that we had to address. The next important thing that again became very stark is the socio-economic divide. So again, some students had the space and time to be able to study maybe during the day or to be engaged in some online classes. Some other families, perhaps because of their socio-economic situation, you know, they're much bigger families and didn't have the time or the space to actually participate in learning whilst they were at home. So some of these students would probably only be able to access online at night when things are quiet at home because maybe of children. So you know, in considering then, at that point in time, as we're about to go into examination and assessment period, how do you set exams or assessments that takes into account the digital issues that some of our students have, the lack of access to those issues, the ability for them to perhaps work under what we would consider normal working times, as well as also has been alluded from our previous panelists, the ability to access the internet and to get data. So these things kind of made this. What do you go about then thinking of an assessment that is for this and for everybody? So what then emerged in the UK sector was what we call a no detriment. It's a policy by we had to go on with exams, and some of these exams had to be shifted or progressed onto like assignments or timed assignments or timed assessment, where we gave significant amount of time so that we could take cognizance of people's ability to go online and also bearing in mind, one last thing I forgot to add is that some of our international students also went back home to their countries. So the ability to set an assessment that was synchronous, i.e. the same time everywhere, just completely went out the window. So we had to be a lot more imaginative and creative in how you go about assessing these students. Bearing in mind, and this is the key thing, that you have to be fair to everybody. Nobody can be penalized or affected because they not have access to internet or they have a limited data. You know, it's not their own doing. So this no detriment policy is like a safety net. So essentially, it assures every student that their average grade after assessment will not be any worse than it was prior to assessment. So that means that students would understand that we are taking into account their academic performance, not just prior to the lockdown, but in some cases, the year before and even the year before that. So that way, because of these limitations I've just described, they are not adversely affected. So in the learning from this, which I'll come on to towards the end again, is about agility, creativity, and adaptability. Then, so moving on then to, okay, we've gone past that assessment, and by June time, we begin to think about, okay, what's happening with this virus? It's still carried on. What do we now need to think about in a reopening during the lockdown period? And we know what students are like, you know, when they come back, it's all dynamic, it's fantastic for our students. So how do you then give students not just the learning which they require, which is critical, but also give them that experience, which is also fundamental to their own individual development. So yes, universities provide academic development, but there's also the social development, which students gain from university based on their interaction with other students. And we all know, so you know, the usual hall that we have, in our estate, we have big lecture rooms for 400, 300, 200, you know, different size rooms are suddenly irrelevant. Suddenly they're kind of, you know, tokens or buildings that are suddenly wasted because of the social distancing measures. So given this kind of scenario where we have, for instance, we have some courses like mathematics, for example, which is taken by nearly all the first years, and you have an enormous number of students, those types of programs have to go online, predominantly online. Whereas some other classes where perhaps modules or courses that have maybe 20 or 30 people could now be delivered face-to-face in those big lecture rooms. So it's having now to how do you take all these kinds of considerations into account as you now begin to prepare for the new academic year. And this is where we have, as most UK universities have opted for the blended learning. And I noted that Professor Adebayo from Covenant University also have taken this approach. So I think many universities, not just in UK, in Nigeria, but also I believe in South Africa, as the previous speaker also mentioned, have opted for an online support as well as classroom support where possible. So really it's a blended approach. Now, but this brings with this opportunity its own challenges. And this comes back to how do you now begin to prepare for this kind of delivery that again is cognizant of all those challenges I've referred to, because we're still in lockdown, because some people are still at home in situations where perhaps they haven't got the time to participate in online activity in real time. So the pedagogy that most UK HE universities have opted to is the synchronous and asynchronous approaches to learning. Asynchronous learning is about prior recording of information, then put onto a platform that students can access. So it is not just about taking your PowerPoint slides that perhaps you'd used in the past and putting it online and asking students to go and learn. No, that's not how it's going to work, because students will just not engage with that. This is back to the pedagogy thing. So it's about creating or replacing your online lecture with perhaps video recordings of small snippets, not 50 minutes, because students won't sit down for 50 minutes when they're at home. There's, you know, perhaps their mom is asking for something or their children doing this. So it's not the same kind of peaceful learning environment that we're used to having. So it's about delivering very short bite-sized pieces, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, reinforced perhaps with some questions and answers. So you have to make it engaging. But that is recorded and given to students and put online so that they can access this material when they can, dependent on you know, their own personal condition. At the same time, there's also the synchronous teaching, and that is where you have the live events. So where possible and where people can engage online, it's to have that student engagement. So the staff-student engagement is critical to learning. But you know, so some people will be able to engage in this kind of learning where somebody is teaching or presenting briefly some material, they stop partway and begin to ask, like we're doing now, begin to ask students for questions. And they begin to interact, very similar like this webinar, questions for the teacher to then respond to. Now, because we know not everybody can attend these kind of live sessions, it all has to be recorded so that, again, it becomes asynchronous, so that students later on who are not able to attend can view that kind of interaction and learn from the kind of experiences that other students were having during that session. So all in all, it is important not just that we go online, but that we rediscover and develop a pedagogy that is suited for the types of students that we have. There are other things also with going with its online. The infrastructure, the IT and the resource learning, paramount. You know, if you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have the ability to present this type of materials to staff, you know, staff, I can give you from my experience, some staff who've been delivering traditionally, it's not easy to transition from your traditional routine where you have control of your class because you've done this. You know what those body language signs or behaviors of your students in the classroom. You can read from that, and you can tailor your emphasis to capture student engagement. But when you move from that, thank you. But when you move,
2 minutes to go.
Thank you very much.
2 minutes.
Okay, but when you move from that to an online system, where those types of indicators that you have used in the past for your teaching is no longer available to you in the same way, it does take some adjusting, but it also takes some training. We've talked about laboratories, but there's also the possibility of virtualization of laboratories. So, you know, not only be able to access all your software from a cloud, but also how you can replay experiments and share data virtually. So these are the types of challenges that the sector is having to address. And clearly in all of this, there must be some opportunity for students to feed into this, because, you know, clearly they're the ones who are going to be using the tools and learning from what we're given. And if what we think we're given is right, it could not be right sometimes. So the student voice is also critical in all of this. Before I know I've got less time, but also again is for us now, we are making a mandatory module for everybody before you actually start a mandatory course, is to go through a simple program that gives students an indication of what it's like to learn in a blended way. It's not the same, and we have to give them the ammunition and the tips as to how to address this. So really, to recap, I hope that these kind of simple examples and the thought processes that need to go through every single step is really to identify how the HE sector has to build resilience for the future, because who knows when this outbreak will come to an end. You know, we just really don't know. What is important is to assure students of our responsiveness, our ability to be agile, to be flexible, to be responsive. Quality assurance processes have to adapt. You have to be able to, you know, we know how quality assurance is. It's a very rigid, fixed way. Those times have to change if we're going to be able to adapt to these types of resilience requirements. Technology is critical. You know, access to data, the core fundamental, the core technology on which all of this is built, it's important. Flexibility and adaptable workforce. I know that there's strikes going on in Nigeria, you know, but again, you know, what we are finding now is that as we are opening some of our areas, some teachers are falling sick with COVID. So when the teacher is out of the class, we can't just leave the students dry. We have to find ways of continuing that engagement with students, and therefore our staff are having to learn to be more flexible and adaptable to be able to pick up other subjects, which is maybe not their expertise, but we have to keep the machine going. We have to find ways to carry on supporting the class, even though staff are falling sick. And lastly, you know, the states that we have now I think we're going to have to rethink the best use of our estate. And clearly, a local outbreak response plan is critical. So for me, these are some of the core principles. I'm sure there's more, as some of my colleagues, panelists have already identified, that helps to shape what resilience should look like for our sector going forward. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Mba, for another aspect of this topic. And also let me thank all the panelists for different aspects of this topic that they have taken up. And I'm sure people have been well tutored, and I'm sure there are questions. I see whoever, any member of the panel who is willing to answer the question should please be do so. I will be expecting more questions because we have made the time short for this presentation so that we can have time for all the questions, so that we'll be able to have a very good, robust, both the panelists and feedback from members of those who are attending. The first question I have here is from Johnny Ogunji, who said, is it correct to say that private universities have more resources than public universities? Can this apply to all private universities? I'm sure those people, the professor from Covenant and private universities. So Professor Abiodun Adebayo, somebody was asking, what's the full name? The full name is Professor Abiodun Adebayo from Covenant University. So the question is it correct to say the private universities have more resources than public universities? And can this apply to all private universities? What's your opinion, please?
All right, thank you so much, the moderator, Professor Famulori. Well, it may not be correct to say that the private universities have more funding than the public, but it is the judicious and effective and efficient management of these resources that matters. Because in private, every money you spend counts. The accounting procedures are different from what we made, maybe slightly different from what we have in the public university. In fact, the proprietor base, they are involved in the management of the resources of the university. So I want to believe that it is the efficient and judicious management of such resources in the private sector, in the private universities, that have made some of the things you see, the kind of achievement that some of the private universities are currently having right now. If you listen to Professor Popola while he was giving his talk, he did say that there is high level of corruption, mismanagement of resources in the public university. And that is what we know. I think sometimes last year, 2 or 3 private universities, public universities had to face EFCC because of mismanagement of the funding. The Vice-Chancellor had to face the bursar and all other persons because of improper management of the resources available to them. So if there is efficient management of such and under a very strict control measure that can be adopted, I believe what the funding that comes to each of the university and the other internally generated revenue should be sufficient to manage our university. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please, can I add?
Yes.
Can I add to that, please, if it's okay?
Yes, please.
Yes. I'm a visiting professor at University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and also was at University of Lagos. So I do visit universities in Nigeria to engage in teaching and some research. And perhaps it could be said that perhaps there's room for improvement in management of financial resources. I think there's always room for improvement in any scenario. But I think there's also the issue about the funding that the government gives to universities. I looked at funding for universities in Nigeria not so long ago, about a year and a half ago. And most of the money that's given to universities goes for recurrent expenditure. The question is that if I'm certain that we have fantastic academics at a university in Nigeria, given the sufficient resource, and given that the right levels of government funding is made available to our public universities, I am certain that there will be significant improvements going forward. So I agree that, yes, we could always improve in terms of the management, but I think that universities are also kind of limited by the actual amount of funding that they can actually get to make some strategic decisions going forward.
Thank you very much. Professor,
yeah, can I just contribute to that? Yes, David has made a point. Abiodun has also made a point. Which I also mentioned earlier on, we have to look at it. Yes, I mean, I look at what TED Fund gives, get some funds from TED Fund, but compare projects in our public universities with those in private universities. The same quality, or at times even better quality than public universities, costs much more in public universities. We need to look at this seriously.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Can I make a comment?
Because government can always do better.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, a short one, so that we can take on other
very
questions.
Short. What I noticed both in US, where I used to work before, and then South Africa, is the engagement with the private sector in a lot of activities in university, including real estate business. Like in my university, we have a lot of buildings which we rent out. So they get this extra funding, which doesn't come from the government at all. So, but here in Nigeria, we don't have that kind of strong partnership with the private sector to really ensure that universities are able to perform their duties. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. 1 minute for Professor Abiodun, 1 minute. One minute.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Well, just in addition, sir, just to say that I think we need to start driving grants, externally sourced grants by our professors. They must, because they must bring in more money to the university, instead of totally depending on government or totally depending on the university to generate this fund. So our professors will need to do more to source for more money to come into the university. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The second question is a serious one. Say, Bill, from Olufemi, any Bokon. Sorry if I didn't call it well. Building resilient higher education sector in Nigeria is supposed, if we want to compete with other universities in the world, how is ASU going to make it possible in view of the incessant strikes action being embarked upon? Building what we are saying now, we want to build a resilient higher education in Nigeria, but now say, how will ASU incessant strike be, what can we do about that so that we'll be able to build this resilient higher education? Is anybody willing to answer this question? ASU?
Yes,
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 Professor.
I can make a comment on this. Yes, it's difficult to build resilience when workers are most often outside of the walls of the university on strike. I'm finding it difficult to understand why academics will stay off their work for 6 months for whatever reasons. And so there is no way we can be resilient with this kind of scenario. And I want to plead with our colleagues. We can't have it all. let's give, let's take. That's the way life is.
Thank you very much. Any other person?
Well, let me make a comment.
Yes.
I have seen a question somebody asked too about ASU strikes. Maybe you'll see it later, but it's there. Or maybe it's in the chat box. But the question is, how can our government be made to honor agreements that they entered into with unions, example ASU, because we can't build a resilient higher education system when agreements are not honored. But my view is that the ASU strike has done terrible damage to our educational system, the strikes generally. We are all the losers, the parents, the students, the government. And we need to think outside the box. Governments also have to enter into agreements that they reasonably can honor. And if they can't, they should keep dialoguing until there is reason on both sides. And it's like it's trading by bat until you agree. Even if it's a 5-year program, but it will be a workable 5-year program. So the long and short of this is that even now there are moves, even by academies, to see whether whoever can come into this matter, because we just have to do something different and get schools back, get ASU call off strike, get government honor. There has to be give and take on both sides. But for the future, we really need a system that is free of strikes. Strikes do more damage than good. Nobody gains. Maybe other people can contribute. It's a major problem.
Thank you very much. Yes, strikes, and that's why private universities who are not members of us who are having a field day, and I hope that what you are suggesting, that the federal government should not agree to anything that they are not going to be able to honor, either now or in the future, so that they don't say you just want this thing to go down and then make and when the people agree, and if the times has changed, then people should also change with time. Because like if you are parents too, if you say I'm going to give you a car and my economy goes down, I may not be able to give you a brand new car, maybe it's Tokuma that you get now or any other thing. Anyway, it has to be give and take between ASU and federal government, so that we'll be able to move the university forward and the university education forward. You know, the question is how, the third question is the private option of somebody saying that which is better, learning system, which learning system is better, hybrid or blended? I think it's semantics. Which one is better? I think Professor Ba will probably want to talk about that. Which is better, hybrid or blended? I think want to say something about that.
I'm not sure what hybrid means, because is hybrid a mixture of both? I'm not quite sure what it means, hybrid.
Because I guess.
Yeah, because I think that they're both the same. So, you know, if I was to compare, you know, a blended learning system, perhaps with a traditional learning system, I think it really all depends on the kind of model that the institution is offering its students. I don't think it's right to say that one is better than the other. I think it very much depends on the types of students and the mission of the university. You know, we have the online university in Nigeria, in the UK, and their mission is purely based on online, not even blended. Whereas, you know, our more traditional, you know, brick and mortar universities like perhaps University of Lagos, or, you know, again, has its own. So I'm not sure I can actually answer which is better. I just think it depends on the mission of the university or the institution.
I think hybrid and blended is half and half. I think that's what it means to me. It's almost the same thing, saying it in another way. That's my own opinion. Somebody's asking whether we can get a recorded version. I think the academy will take care of that. I think the building resilience in Nigerian universities, which is the title of this, has been answered by some of the things that Professor Abiodun Adebayo put in the and the Professor Popola. I hope if the people who are given this, they will be able to go back to the chart, to the slides and see the answers to those ones. Another question, very lengthy one. Make your question very short so that we'll be able to take care of that. Let me go to some shorter ones. Some private universities conducted exams using WhatsApp medium in a bid to conclude 2019-2020. Is this okay, since we know that such students cannot be supervised? Those who have done the exam under this one, can they respond to that? I think Professor Popola said they've done the exam, and I think Professor Adebayo too. Can you respond to that? That since the students are not supervised, is it okay?
Yeah, so maybe I start my first.
I didn't say.
Let's Professor Adebayo finish first.
All right.
Let's Professor Adebayo finish.
Yeah, at Covenant, that was the major challenge that we had. We were finding it difficult to really see the best approach. We have tried all versions of technologies that we have. We have the one that will mute your system. You cannot control anything except when you are having one-on-one interview. But the challenge is, should the internet goes off, how would you, or maybe it could be done deliberately by the student. So how do you control that? So that was one of the principal reasons why we have not been able to conduct our own exams on ground. Now, I had a colleague who worked in the office and from another university, private university, and who said to me that he's currently marking the scripts of those students as it is now, but that most of those students were writing virtually the same thing, and they were not even performing better. So how do you also blend that? And they have the chance of forwarding those messages, the questions to their friends and all of that. So there were a lot of complications, a lot of issues. But if you are going to go that route, the best approach would have been the multiple choice options, where in such a way, the candidates can be restricted as soon as, and wherever you pause or wherever you stop the question or you stop responding to the question, that ends the exam. So for instance, internet goes off, your exam has concluded. So we have quite a lot of issues, and that was why at Covenant we did not do our own online examination. It's
okay, thank you very much. Let Professor Kukwala say something. Professor Kukwala, please.
Well, I didn't say that we conducted, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, go on, please.
Yes. Yeah,
I hear you.
Didn't say that we conducted examinations. We did not. We were actually at the verge of trying it, and it didn't work. So we put it on hold. But we conducted matriculation virtually. We also conducted convocation virtually.
Those one does not need the supervision. But thank you very much.
Yeah,
so I think
exactly.
conducting examination is still being perfected by people to see how the laptop can see you, how you can, your fingertips, if it's not the one touching the laptop, then it will not be, there will be a noise. There will be a point led to the university that is an alarm. So that, but that is being perfected now in effort to build resilient university. I think what we are saying here is that what has during this COVID has exposed us to so many things that is not, that we don't have. And one of the questions is, can the university make it mandatory for every student and staff to have ICT certification because it has become a norm now. I think somebody asked that question. Should we now make it compulsory for everybody, teachers and students, to make it compulsory for them to have ICT practice if it is not so already? Is somebody going to talk about that briefly?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps I can start. I think in that question also, there's another question that kind of touches on the same point by Cabo Marketka. Sorry if I mispronounced the surname. Asking the question about how does the HE sector or private and public sectors work together to create internet access for students in the rural area. So I think it touches, so I think perhaps the two could come together. I think that's a very difficult, a very good question. And it's really something that government needs to set the agenda or strategy going forward. I know the Academy of Science, part of its remit is to engage with government and to inform government of challenges in higher education, which we're doing all the time. But I think it's through platforms like this and discussions like this that we try to see how do you answer that kind of a question. It needs to bring in the telecommunication companies. It needs to bring in the HE sector. It needs to bring in areas of renewable energy, so that you can create an infrastructure that would allow access to people in the rural areas to have the option to even think about being certified or to use ICT, because they need that infrastructure to help create that. So it's very much the mission of the Academy of Science to bring these kinds of things to the attention of government to address these kind of questions. It would be unfair in my view to mandate that everybody should be certified in ICT when access to such ICT, even access to data, is restrictive and has socioeconomic consequences. So, I think it's a very good question, but a very broad question.
Thank you very much, Professor Okuola. And then later, Professor Wambebe.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, sir. David, yes, I'm there, sir. I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, go on, please.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yes, David hit on a very important point. Access to internet, access to even the machine. But my thinking is that whether we like it or not, there has to be some co-sharing of the funding of education. Yes, parents, students, government, everyone. What we have done in my university is to have a negotiation with a company that will supply either tablets or laptop, depending on what the student wants, with a flexible payment plan of 4 years. And the students are excited about it. They did the negotiation themselves, and we are signing the MOU. The same we're doing with internet service providers. So it's just for us to accept the reality of the times that we are in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wambebe.
Yes. Yeah, just to share the experience of South Africa in this area. The government entered into a discussion with the telecommunication companies so that they were able to offer, the facility like laptop and all that. But in addition, the students are given data per month so that they're able to use that data to discuss with their lecturers. And even in the rural areas, I'm sure that will happen here in Nigeria as well. They use their hotspots to be able to engage with their lecturers. Like I've been having Microsoft meeting with my students, and some of them live in villages, and we never had any problem. Even tomorrow I have one again. So I believe that can work here. Again, engagement with the private sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We in the University of Lagos, we try to call all the infrastructure IT suppliers to come and negotiate with them, and they were they are not as flexible as we expected. but at least we brought them together to bring the competition to them. And we are still looking at that. It's so much money to have this data. And unfortunately, unlike the private university where almost everybody is maybe rich enough to have a tablet or a tablet or a laptop, University of Lagos and public universities are the place where we have most of them are poor people, and makes it difficult for us to say, when we do this kind of thing, we have about 70% of them having ability to respond, whereas in the other places, 70% is not good enough. For this, it must be more than 90% for us to be able to see that we be able to deliver seriously. And it costs a lot of money to put these things in the cloud so that there will be no downside. Somebody is asking about the cost of internet and the epileptic electricity. But I think, is there anybody with options to see what can we do for the students to be able to, first of all, the cost of data? What are you recommending for Nigeria? Do you want special anything for universities and students, and epileptic power supply? So what do you think we can do so that we'll be able to have a resilient university system, education system in Nigeria? Any member of the panel?
Well, let me start with these few comments. I think our government must be responsible. Because when you traveled outside the shores of this country, on getting to the campus where you are, you have a smart campus where these things are freely available. And bulk of it, it's from the government. Now, our government needs to be more sensitive and pay more attention to driving education. Now, if you look at recently there was an increment in the tariff of electricity. Now, we are asking, electricity is not even available in the first instance, and yet government is also increasing the tariff without any justification for that. Our government must wake up to its responsibility. I also want to advise this, particularly to TED Fund, to see how they can support effectively institutions by creating these internet facilities for them, for the institution, particularly government-owned institution. Yes, you have said maybe the private sector, they have that. In our campus, everywhere we have access. The room, my personal housing. But the issue is that how many persons can come to the private universities? The child of the poor, of the poorest of the poor, cannot afford that. So government will need to improve more on that. So TED Fund, we should find a way, creative way of ensuring that certain percentage of its budget is devoted to internet facilities, IT infrastructure, and electricity. Because you can provide this internet, but how many persons can also access this? So that's my comment this morning.
Thank you very much. Yes, Professor Kukuola. Professor Kukuola, please.
Well, yes, sir. I would like to challenge the academia. Yes, government is always there. And the truth is that nowhere in the world would government do these things alone. Can we have a scenario where we also engage government by way of advice, by way of putting these proposals together in understandable form, understand the language of government, understand how lobbying is out, Let's engage government. Let's engage the students. Let's engage the parents. I'm not sure the academia is doing this enough. And I think this should be a takeaway from this webinar.
Thank you very much. One of the reasons why this webinar is taking place is that we need, as an academy, to have a collection of good thoughts that will make higher education system resilient. Things are changing rapidly, so that's why we are having this. Everything you have here today, either as question or as a presentation, will be distilled together to find information that we are going to present to the government, so that we'll be able to make higher education to be more resilient in Nigeria. Another question, thank you for all your answers. Another question is from, I think we have answered that one, sorry. So emphasis, how would you would like to emphasize that science and technology are the main drivers of this, economic and social development. Therefore, it is important for the panelists to discuss how to adapt a unified strategy for SCI. I think we have said that this must be done, and so let me see if there are other questions there. Professor Babalola, a distinguished fellow, is asking for the recorded session for our university. I'm sure you can get this one from the academy. A clear divide between private and public universities regarding e-learning. How can this be addressed given poor situation?
Moderator, while you are looking through, let me say something while you are checking through the questions. You see, it's important for government, and the academy will do its bit, of course. We will distill what we have been discussing, and we will make submissions, because we want to help build a resilient higher education system in Nigeria for the benefit of everybody, all Nigerians. We know what many of the problems are. They have been analyzed even in this forum today by our speakers. Money is important, and revenues are dwindling for government. That's why I'm also worried sometimes, like the long strike. Even if I promise to give you this, and I look at the source is dwindling, there should be able to be a renegotiation of even the negotiated agreements. And I hope ASU and the government will do that in due course, especially in the light of the economic situation in the country. And we can't shut the schools indefinitely because there was an agreement and so on. Maybe those who are negotiating on the part of government and also not putting making the situation very clear. I'm sure the ASU people are not insensitive themselves. They are also parents, they are also teachers, and they know. So, but the point is, we also need to be more creative in the universities about how we can solve this problem, about power. We're talking about power. I remember when we were in administration at the University of Nigeria in Soka, the same power thing. Can't we find an alternative way of powering our campus other than just waiting for NEPA? And then you have a NEPA bill of about, we call it NEPA bill, still NEPA, of let's say 8 million or 9 million naira for the Soka campus, 7 million for the Enugu campus, 14 or 15 million. And your goods and services are not more than 2 million a month as a Vice-Chancellor. So how are you going to cope with NEPA? You negotiate with NEPA, you pay them small, they connect you, and that's not sustainable. So, but we ourselves, we consider a small hydro dam. I know if I used to have one, I don't know whether it's functional. But the universities must look inwards in ways we can use technology to solve part of our problem. Power our campuses, there must be something we can do. And then government itself must, talking about making tablets and laptops available to students. Government can organize it through those who provide, through the ICT companies. In those days, we did with the indigenous ICT companies, even to supply laptops. to our students, and universities are still doing that. So there must be something we can do to make things better and to cope with the realities, because the blended learning is going to come. But I will expect our panelists, please, just before we go, maybe, David, you can, something about labs, practicals, that's what bothers me in the future. In the line of blended teaching, how do we run the practicals? How do we do the labs? What are the efficient for engineering students, for medical students, nurses, and all the things we produce? How do we do that?
Okay.
How do we do that remotely?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. If I just perhaps give two examples of how we're trying to address this lab, obviously from a UK perspective, because of obviously the social distancing issue. One thing that we've already done is to buy portable lab kits. So there's some portable things, like for electrical engineering, you can buy boards, which you can then send to students. They can then write code, which they can embed into the hardware of the board, and they can then do some experiments at home using the software they can access on their laptops, a USB connected to a portable experimental kit. So that is one way of doing those kind of small demonstrations that you would normally do in the lab very quickly. We're taking that off the campus and giving it to students to do themselves at home. So there are small kits in mechanical, electrical, in different subject areas. I'm speaking of engineering because that's my context. So that's one way. The other way, in relation to those big experiments that you do in laboratories, what we're doing is we're recording our technicians doing the experiments at different stages with a voiceover, but then giving the data from those experiments to the students so they can access that data remotely and do the post-analysis again remotely. I agree it's not ideal because you don't get to smell the oil, if you know what I mean, because there's a benefit in smelling that oil. But they can see the whole process, but they can crunch the data. So in the end, they have good quality data, which they can then do some post-analysis on. So, for us, for blended learning, the essential part of the blended learning, the face-to-face, which is essential, is mostly laboratories and seminars. That is the core part where we want to get students back in. But if the government was to lock down again tomorrow and say, everybody stay at home, we will then quickly switch to this recorded sessions and provide data to students remotely. So that's how we're trying to address this issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There's a question to Professor Adebayo, question number 10. I don't know whether you can see the questions. Professor Adebayo, say thanks for, it makes sense for resource-limited institutions to leverage on existing resources if equivalence can be figured out. Professor Adebayo, could you please, do you give credit, academic credit to students who took carceral courses? And if so, how best to make decision about this? Question number 10, can you see it?
Yes, I can see that, sir. In fact, I've even...
Yes, question.
Yeah, but what we do here at Covenant, particularly with Coursera courses, since we entered into partnership with them, is to find out some of the courses, the relatedness of the courses. And particularly if I'm teaching my own part of the course and I see one or two areas that the candidate will benefit, I will recommend that course to the candidate, and I will use that to grade that candidate for as part of the continuous assessment. So, but we are at Covenant, we are also working to see how we can also blend part of our curriculum, still in line with NUC, and at the same time in line with what Coursera is doing, because Coursera is actually giving the student hope for the company, creating some sets of skills that will be needed in the companies. And that's what Coursera is all about. And at the same time, I partner with, world-class universities like Harvard. You have Harvard professors, Yale professors also online teaching these courses that we are talking about. So at Covenant, we have assigned part of our continuous assessment to take care of that while we work for something better in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. What do we do? The question again is question number. I think we have taken question number by Olufemi. I think we have done that. The next question is, how can we assess the presentation of the slide? I think I've done that. That's Professor Hammond of Elizade University. Akonji, Professor Akonji. Okay, I think that has been answered also, that the student, nobody has done exam, that because it cannot be supervised. But I think we should work on ability to do examination online, in which we'll be able to see what is possible, what the students are doing. I heard that MTU did exam like that, something close to that, and they were able to see a lot of things that they were not looking for. As a national, manage the problem of cost. What of this cost? I think is the major thing that we are looking at. How should we do it with cost? That the federal government supply only the personnel cost, and to make a resilient university, the cost of functioning as a university itself is not there. How can we manage this problem? How will we be able to pay for internet and online? Because we look at how much it's going to cost to have online teaching, it's going to cost more than 20 million to be able to put our courses on the web, on the cloud, so that there will be no downtime, so that we'll be able to get away from this electricity problem, to be able to back up the data center. So how can we solve that problem? Because of power is a major problem. And I think we have said that we should look for alternative. I'm looking for other questions that question number by Simidele or number Anjo. Vice-Chancellors at government in the university, they should drive the ICT infrastructure in public universities. Alternative source of power generation, solar, windmill to be considered. University are to innovate on power solutions. I think that's just giving solutions. I'm sure that if somebody is going to innovate about power, they will first of all have enough money to do the innovation. Because if I know what to do, but if there is no power, no money to do what you want to do, it's still going to be a problem. So what can we do? Yes, somebody said private sector, but private sector these days are not doing very well. So what will be the other ways of funding then? Other ways of funding. So I had one of my students call me from US yesterday telling me that the federal government in US distributed laptops to students. So can we have a replica in Nigeria or something like that? Yeah, Professor Popola, maybe to round off this session, to round off. Yes, Professor Popola, please. So that I will now round up. Yes. Yes, Professor Popola, I see frozen. Okay. Okay.
Yes, most of the times I get amused by these incomparable comparisons, if I can use that. We compare US with Nigeria, we compare UK with Nigeria. What's the tax regime in the US? Do students pay fees? Here we're saying we should not pay fees, yet we want the best. I'm afraid, is this possible? I think we have to think all of this out. I'm just playing the devil's advocate.
In absence of other questions, we thank all panelists for coming. But from what you have said today, if I can make a very short summary, is that funding in the university, to be able to have a resilient university in Nigeria, funding is critical. And as we are aware that funding is very limited, panelists have said that funding should be used efficiently. Just like the private universities are being efficient with their fund, public universities should make all things possible so that they can use the fund, the very meager fund they have, to be used efficiently. Also, to be ready to have a resilient university in case of any problem, whenever problem comes up, blended teaching should be a priority. You don't have to wait for a pandemic or of any type or any situation before we can have a blended teaching. And as Professor David Umba said, he suggested that there should be a teacher and another support to be taking care of the student response so that we'll be able to have good interaction. He suggested that just putting your recorded version or PDF on LMS is not a very good way of practical courses. You should have video courses on that. He's talking about, everybody has agreed that data is very critical, and there should be a negotiation with the service providers, maybe for students, so that we'll be able to have online teaching and make a blended university possible. And government should please negotiate with ASU, and they should, so that there will be a resilient university. And also pleaded, according to the panelists, that ASU should also be flexible and negotiate and renegotiate whatever has happened, they've negotiated before, so that we don't shut the university. We cannot have a good higher education if there is a problem with shutting down of the university. And also the university should be ready in that way. A resilient university will be built, and it will be better for us as a nation to have resilient universities. On that note, maybe I give 1 minute to former President, Professor Bidapobe, to say one more.
Yeah, I was going to call him.
Professor Bidapobe, please. Professor Bidapobe, please. Professor Bidapobe.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank
yes,
you.
Please.
Thank you very much. I have listened to the wonderful ideas that has come, and I want to thank the Academy for bringing us this opportunity to participate in this wonderful webinar. Now, my interest was when you are looking at the blended mode of learning, because I've been involved in a very small way with a university that was quite anxious, because the private university, to complete the session so that it can start another one. The overheads of the university was getting very heavy. So there's a need to have some level of continuity. Now, we did everything in terms of online learning and the COSECA and all of them. But when it comes to practicals, there's clearly a gap. But I thought I could give some of my experience. You know, this idea of online learning is not that new. I remember when I was Vice-Chancellor, we got some grants from the Federal Ministry of Education, and we wanted to be able to see from Makoka, we want to see Idiaraba. And that equipment, by the time I left, was at the basement of the library. And we have another one in the library at Idiaraba. There are many computers that are powerful to look at all this. I don't know if there is anything that is happening to that. And I know that the issue of putting our course online was also better at that time, and a lot of work was done. I mean, some of these ideas, pioneers in trying to put the work, includes Professor Abbas, who is also a fellow of the Academy of Science. But again, ASU was very opposed to this for whatever reason, and that whole concept was frustrated. Now, you see, about the same time, MIT came with some programs whereby you can actually teach labs online. Now, what they do, subject to the time, and we had one of our, I think it's probably, no, it's no longer, it's not yet a fellow, who worked for MIT. And the whole idea is that we could tune in to an MIT lab, and our students can participate in that lab. So that is what is happening. But I know it's not still the same thing. And some of the concepts that were developed in this other university I'm talking about is that when it is time for lab, we get our labs people, technicians and technologists, to be in the lab and demonstrate and actually do what they are doing while the students are watching. We also did that. We noticed that it is not sufficient. So what is sufficient that you must have hands-on. We were actually very afraid, and I think the academy should be afraid of this concept of chemistry without practicals or whatever, something like that. Because I think that is the major problem that destroyed science education in Nigeria. We don't want to go back there, pandemic or no pandemic. So I think what we need to do, yes, we'll continue to teach them, but they must eventually, before they are discharged, because I see people in Covenant, in Crawford, perhaps in Afebawala, saying they have finished the session. But they couldn't have finished the session not until these students put their hands on those laboratories. I remember vividly what we did at the College of Medicine. The College of Medicine, when they were looking, the Department of Anatomy, they had almost 1.5 microscopes. Now, how do you want to understand the human body if you don't have an opportunity to touch it and cut it and see it and change things around? I mean, you'll be totally out of the place. We needed to go and whatever we have to do to take money, even from Makoka at that time, and we were able to buy several microscopes for the College of Medicine in Diaraba. That was what earned us accreditation in that Department of Anatomy. Either to what they would do, yes. So these are the issues. So I'm just saying, please let's rethink. Let's find a way whereby they can actually meet in clusters. That is to say, we can ask them in Open University, for example, how they do their, in various assignments. So if you are in Osun State, you can go to the government college or wherever, and go and do this sort of thing. We can actually teach them in clusters, but they must touch those lab equipment and they must touch it. They cannot just see it and say they know it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, past president of Academy. Yes, thank you very much. And the panelists have said that they have problem with practicals, but they still say at this time when we are locked down, they teach the theory, and when the school comes back, they will find a way of doing that. So on this note, I'd like to thank every member of the panel. I want to first of all thank the president of the Academy for finding time to be here. It's good that you lead well and make all these things happen. We pray that God will continue to be with you. We thank the panelists, starting from Professor Labode Kokuola, Vice-Chancellor of Osun State University, Professor Abiodun Adebayo, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Convened University, Professor Charles Wambebe, President and founder of International Biomedical Research in Africa. He has given us US, South Africa, and Nigerian experience. And last but not the least, Professor David Mba, from UK. We thank all of you for making this webinar a success. And we hope that when we call you again, you answer our call and under another forum to be able to highlight what is required to build a resilient higher education in Nigeria. I'm sure I have to also thank the Secretariat for the support. I'm sure we are going to distill your presentations and a communique will come for it to be able to negotiate or talk to government to see whatever they can do about how to make education in Nigeria a resilient one. Thank you. On that note, I thank everybody for coming, and I hope when we call you again, you'll be here. The webinar, COVID-19 webinar series will continue, and hope next time when we call you, you tune in. And on that note, I want to say good afternoon to every member for your questions and all other participation that you have had. Thank you very much. God bless.